Good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you might be. My name is Kevin Michael Grace, and this is the KMG show. I should let you know right from the very beginning that this show is going to be a little rough and ready, as I have spent the day in last minute panicked planning for my move tomorrow. And I should let everyone know, as previously warned, there will not be a book club tomorrow. The book club will be next week, God willing. And I will not be on Vancouver Island next week. I will cross the great ocean, that is to say, the strait at any rate, and I will be on mainland BC for some time. It's not permanent. Can be permanent because all of my stuff is here, my worldly possessions are in storage here in Victoria, but since April the 7th, I have been living, I don't know, on a week-to-week or even day-to-day basis, very quotidian, and I don't know, it's exhausted me. And so after I move back to the mainland, things should become a little secure, at least for more than 1 week at a time, which will be good. Oh, yes, your connection is unstable. Please wait while we recover. This will be the last day that you will be able to complain rightfully about the degradation of this live stream because, well, I won't be in a hotel as of tomorrow. So things should be better in that regard, assuming I get the whole cable thing set up properly. I wanted to talk about comedy right off the top. And I thought I'd start by quoting a song, the lyrics of a song from one of my favorite bands, Fountains of Wayne, R.I.P. Adam Schlesinger. The song is called Comedienne, and it goes like this. In for the weekend, out for the night, she gets caught in the curtain and lost in the lights, but she's wearing a turban and feeling all right, and she's hoping to God that they're coming tonight. There's a man in the corner, and they're dumb, and they bicker and fight. She knows there are going to be times when no one goes for her funniest lines. Comedienne, please make up your mind. Are you laughing or crying? Are you killing or dying tonight? Back at the bar, she's been licking her wounds. He says, give up the vision, performing in rooms. If you work on your timing and drop me a line, baby, one of these Mondays, you're going to be fine. She knows there are going to be times when no one goes for her funniest lines. Comedienne, please make up your mind. Are you laughing or crying? Are you killing or dying tonight? Yes, laughing or crying, killing or dying. That is the comedian's world. As they say, it's easy to be serious, but it's tough to make people laugh. It turns out in woke comedy, one does not need to make people laugh anymore. In fact, laughter seems to be surplus to requirements. And so we have comedians now who are not funny, but they say the right things. And that's really the most important part of it, isn't it? Being on the right side of history, not saying anything that's going to get one canceled, just letting everyone know that you've done your best, etc., etc. The old rules of comedy were rather more severe. That is to say, make me laugh. Now, making people laugh is hard. It's really hard. But making people accept you for what you are and for your effort, for being on the right side of history or whatever, That's pretty easy, particularly these days. And so this leads to a new kind of comedy. How would you put it? A kind of quasi comedy, although quasi might be pushing it too far, because we're not really talking about comedy anymore. We're not talking about laughter anymore. We're simply talking about I don't know, being accepted for who you are. And which brings us to Sarah Cooper. Sarah Cooper is not, well, she's not Australian. She's Jamaican, an immigrant as a child to the United States. And I guess she's learned the lesson of woke comedy, which is pretty much to make fun of the country that you came to. White people be so like, ho, ho, ho. Yes, yes, you nailed it. There's a piece by Ben Sixsmith in the U.S. Spectator called Sarah Cooper Isn't Funny. Again, she's not one of those Australian comedians who edge, just edge. No laughter, no tears, just edge, edge, edge. Sorry, I stole a bit there from Harry Enfield. But her lip-syncing videos elicit a lot of what Donald Glover called Clapter. That's not really comedy. Now, coming from Donald Glover, well, yes, that's pretty authoritative because Donald Glover is one of the funniest men on earth, and he actually makes people laugh. But let's get to this essay here. If Joe Biden wins the U.S. presidential election in November, there is one possible outcome that even conservatives will be forced to welcome. The world might see less of Sarah Cooper. If you have been on Twitter in the last 6 months, you will have no doubt encountered Cooper. Her fantastically popular videos offer a kind of impersonation of Donald Trump. Cooper does not mimic the president, however. She has no original script and never speaks. Instead, she plays the president's speeches aloud and opens and closes her mouth as if she is speaking his words. That is not quite all she does. She also screws up her face. There is some minor craftsmanship to what she does. She is not just pulling Kenneth Williams-esque grimaces. Her comedy, if we can call it that, is in emphasizing the erratic and incoherent nature of the president's verbiage. So she screws up her face as Trump's monologues veer from one peculiar pronouncement to another. Humor is, of course, subjective. I cannot control what makes you laugh. But if you see the poster of Russian President Vladimir Putin next to a big paper heart in one of Cooper's recent videos and do not sigh with boredom, it's fair to say you are easily amused. We've all heard thousands of Trump is gay for Putin jokes over the last 5 years. My problem with this type of comedy, indeed with all impersonations of Trump, including Alec Baldwin's Emmy-winning skits on Saturday Night Live, is that they cannot improve on the pure comic ecstasy of the real thing, is the combination of Trump's nonsensical speeches, his matchless confidence, plus the fact that he is president of the United States that makes him so hilarious. Now, I have to say that Alec Baldwin is an outstanding actor, both dramatic and comedic, and his mimicry is, I don't know, second to none. I was reading recently about him on the set of a very underrated film, circa 1990, called Miami Blues, with Jennifer Jason Leigh. And apparently on the set, he gave a impersonation of the director of photography, Tak Fujimoto. And then he proceeded to give impressions of the Grips and such like, and everyone was bowled over. That is to say that Alec Baldwin is enormously talented. I don't like particularly his impersonation of Donald Trump for the reason that it's not very imaginative. If you look at, say, the show Futurama, and you look at, say, Billy West's impersonation of Richard Nixon, it's not exactly Richard Nixon. It is Richard Nixon with something of a twist, which makes it funnier. We all know what Donald Trump looks like, and we all know what he sounds like and how he talks. And simply to regurgitate this is not particularly funny. But I'm not going to blame Alec Baldwin for this. I'm going to blame the writers of Saturday Night Live, who, no, you're just going to do Donald Trump straight, no twist, and Donald Trump is a bad man, and he's ridiculous, so that is the joke. Ben Smith's sixth interview with Jonathan Swan of Axios, Swan asks him to comment on the legacy of the late John Lewis, the Georgia congressman and original freedom rider. It becomes swiftly obvious that Trump knows Lewis mainly because he did not attend his inauguration. The more Swan prods him to comment on Lewis's life's work, the more he returns to picking the scab on his ego that was left by Lewis's snub. As he thrusts himself into a characteristic assertion that nobody has done more for Black Americans than I have, you cannot help but laugh. Swan's straight man accuse Ben Sixsmith of lacking a sense of humor. Titan of the civil rights era. What does that mean exactly? Well, it means that 55 years ago or so, he was on a bridge somewhere in Alabama, and he made some sort of brave stand. And I don't know, he was beaten with a nightstick or something. That's pretty much his sole achievement on Earth. The whole point of this interview was to get Donald Trump to grovel and talk about, oh, the enormous contribution of Congressman John Lewis, and we shall never see his life again, und so weiter. But Trump, Ben Sixsmith, didn't get it. Sixsmith continues, this is not to say that Trump cannot be eloquent. Just listen to his Warsaw speech or this year's address at Mount Rushmore. But only the most dogged of partisans would maintain that his fantastic egotism and incuriosity don't his average interviews and announcements masterpieces of deranged blunder. If you need Ms. Cooper's exaggerated emphasis to spell out the absurdity, then the fault lies closer to home. Well, to accuse Donald Trump of fantastic egotism, I don't know. It's a categorical confusion because all politicians are fantastically egotistic, particularly those who want to become president of the United States, and particularly those who decided at the age of 12 or whatever that they were going to become president. It's not really something that a sane person would do. If they had any idea of all the hoops that they would have to jump through, all of the humiliation they would have to endure, they would have said, no, I think I'll become a hedge fund trader or something like that. In curiosity, I don't know that Donald Trump is incurious. I don't get that idea about him at all. Because he's not willing to read, 50 pages of briefing books every day, as we've been told, does not make him incurious. Not at least as how I see it. When Trump triumphed in the 2016 election, liberals and leftists consoled themselves with the idea that at least his success would be good for comedy. What are your thoughts about President Donald Trump's impact on America? Insisted one piece for CNN. No one can deny that he's truly made one sector of America great. Again, a political comedy. Really, I can think of great comedy that came out of the Bush era. Little as I have in common with Stephen Colbert, I appreciate the genius of his White House Correspondents' Dinner speech in which he hailed a president who did not just stand for on things, specifically rubble. Whereas the equivalent for the time of Trump, most progressive comedians do not have the sense of the absurd that could make Trump's Bolivarian enthusiasm for smart alecky one-liners that might have pinned more earnest presidents like Barack Obama. How about the comedic potential there? It seems to be vast. You have this man with this absurd name, well, absurd to Americans anyway, Barack Hussein Obama II, who grew up in Hawaii, which is pretty funny by itself, and then spent several years in Indonesia, which is pretty funny, where he was known as Barry Soetoro. This is comedy gold already. He's married to a woman called Michelle, a ferocious woman who looks like a Doberman pinscher. And she's even more ferocious when she smiles rather than her usual scowl, because her smile is that of a Doberman. He has no sons. He has two daughters. He was living with his mother-in-law in the White House, and his chief of staff was another ferocious black woman. I mean, the jokes write themselves. This rather fey president being beaten down by all these ferocious women. I mean, come on, seriously. If you've seen any if you know comedy at all, you know, as I say, the jokes practically write themselves. But no, Barack Obama was the magic Negro. We can't make fun of him. How about the ridiculously prissy way in which he spoke? How about his habit of dropping his G's whenever he was speaking to a black audience? How about the obvious joke of him being in the Reverend Wright's congregation for 20 years, where you have a man who's described by Joe Biden famously, the first African American politician who was, articulate and clean and such like. What must it have been like to be exposed to deranged black theology of the Reverend Jeremiah Wright? No, but we never got any of that. How about a president who, let's see, speaks at vast rallies in Berlin campaigning for president? I see some comedic potential there. How about a president who accepts a Nobel Peace Prize for nothing, for literally nothing, for showing up? Again, vast comedic potential that was never tapped. Sixsmith continues, where's the equivalent for the time of Trump? Most progressive comedians do not have the sense of the absurd that would make the Trump's administration any funnier than it is. Yes, indeed. There's a lot of Clapter going on, said the actor and rapper Donald Glover in a 2016 interview with Vulture. A lot of N-words, N-peoples be like. Glover started clapping exaggeratedly. So yes, so true. Yes, so true. But what you did isn't funny. They're just clapping and laughing to be on the right side of history. Cooper's videos elicit a lot of Clapter. Oh yes, he's so stupid. I know it. What an idiot. Even her defenders struggle to maintain that they are actually funny, though. At this point, their value to me is informational, not comedic, said one writer for Mel magazine. It is easier to stomach and process Trump's appalling remarks without looking at his sweaty ham of a face. This effect, of course, could be achieved by someone who is not even attempting to be funny. Well, if you think Donald Trump is funny, then why not look at the real thing instead of, I can only describe Sarah Cooper as visual snark. There's no writing there. There's not any auditory snark. I was going on about this on Twitter, yesterday, and someone said that her shtick is Jon Stewart's shtick. And I begged to disagree. I don't hold any brief for Jon Stewart. I've seen him in many things. He was very funny, I thought, on the Larry Sanders Show. Some of the stuff on his show was pretty good. But until Jon Stewart grew that beard and decided to assume the mien of an anguished Talmudic scholar, he was approximately infinitely more amusing than Sarah Cooper. I mean, what exactly is it that she does? Well, I mean, what does she do? Oh, yes, I'm going to make my snarky faces while lip syncing to Donald Trump. Is this all about drugs? Are actual jokes too difficult to understand for people today? Does the joke have to be lined up? Does it have to be packaged in a way that says this is funny? Of course, it's intrinsic in all comedic ventures that, oh, this is supposed to be funny, but the laughs are not built in. The laughs have to be earned. Again, back to Six Smith, the Mel resignations must really annoy the president. There was even a half-hearted conspiracy theory that Trump wanted to ban TikTok to suppress her videos. It is not impossible for this to be true, though it seems unlikely that Trump even knows who she is, compelled to follow others on Twitter. Well, I suspect that political comedy, since when it started in, when was that, 1975, 1976? Because again, Alec Baldwin is an exceedingly good actor, both comedic and dramatic. The liberal obsession with getting under Trump's skin is the cousin of the conservative mania for triggering the libs, which has inspired a million heroically uncreative jokes about, for instance, identifying as attack. I think the identifying as attack helicopter is pretty decent. There's no humor in the joke itself. The humor lies in imagining the outraged reactions of one's opponents, who quite probably are not even paying attention. I fear that the twin forces social media has enabled of intense polarization and fierce status signaling will inflict a great deal more Clapter on us. Will a conservative comedian start lip-syncing to Joe Biden's bumbling anecdotes? Someone probably already has, and the Western world will continue to sink, as Peter Cook put it in the 1960s, giggling into the sea. Conservative comedians? Are there any conservative comedians? Is it allowed for there to be conservative comedians? I'm thinking of Sam Hyde. Sam Hyde at a comedy show on a cable station in the United States. And, oh no, this cannot be allowed. This must be canceled. And it was canceled. I suppose the closest thing to a conservative comedian in the United States would be a Canadian, Norm Macdonald. And Norm Macdonald is not very upfront about his politics. But if you go back and you could search this on YouTube, all the things that he said about Michael Jackson, say, which apparently got him fired, oh, and O.J. Simpson, which got him fired from Saturday Night Live, to wit, oh, Michael Jackson, you know he's a homosexual pedophile, right? Or O.J. Simpson, you know that he killed his wife and got away with it, right? Edgy. Apparently that is too edgy to state this sort of stuff. Norm Macdonald is clever enough not to come be up front and say exactly what he thinks, but why would you, I don't know, when people watched Jack Benny, when people laughed at Jack Benny for decades, were people wondering, well, who did he vote for in 1948? No, I don't think that they did, because that was not particularly important. People love to laugh. Well, normal people love to laugh, but the SJWs are not normal people, because they can only laugh if the laugh has been approved by their Politburo beforehand. Let's go to the chat here. ChocoCan666 says, I bequeath Kevin my ancestral manner on the poor. Too kind. Too kind. Bob Paxton, fake comedy, acting and projecting. Someone remind me what the name of that Australian woman is? The angry lesbian Australian, or am I repeating myself, comedian Hannah something or other, that everyone has been carrying on about for the last few years. How percent did Kevin have dreams of being an actor? I've talked about this in the past. I talked about it on Luke Ford's show. In 5 years, I took 5 years of acting classes. And afterwards, I was rather put out, because I realized that I was taught nothing whatsoever about acting. Not in terms of voice, not in terms of projection, not in terms of characterization, not in terms of movement, nothing useful. There was a lot of improv there, and I hate improv with a passion because it's just an excuse for people to, well, not act, to just be goofy, to say the first thing that comes to their minds. If you know anything about stand-up comedians, it's a lapidary art, honing your monologue. And I guess that reaches its nadir with Robin Williams. Is like, Martin Short did a devastating takedown of him on Second City TV. I saw on Saturday Night Live. Remember, I wonder who wrote this sketch. Steve Martin introducing the Energy Brothers. It's just energy. It's like, yeah, and then that's a substitute for comedy. Wow, they're really putting themselves out there, which is the opposite of what comedy used to be. Yeah, sure, put yourself out there and sweat on the stage desperately, and then the hook comes out to pull you off the stage. Because we're not interested in how hard you try, we're interested in the results. We're interested in how many people are laughing. I admire actors greatly because it's something that I would like to do, but I can't do. I don't know. I'm pretty good in line readings, I suppose, but the rest of it, no. The rest of it, no. Perhaps if I'd been given proper instruction, I could have been half decent at it, but I wasn't. Kevin, what is the comedian's name during the critique? It's Donald Glover, who was a writer for 30 Rock, and then he was one of the stars, of the heart, one might say, of Community, which is my favorite TV show. And then an HBO show called Atlanta. But I suppose he is best known now as a rapper called Childish Gambino, which is one of those names you get when you put your name into one of those algorithms, which comes up with rap names. Interestingly enough, the fellow who writes the music for Donald Glover's raps is a Swedish fellow, or a man with a Swedish name, Ludwig Göransson, I believe his name is, who is the fellow who wrote the music for a Community. And I suppose they first started doing this on the Community Christmas episode. Well, they had several Christmas episodes. The one that savagely satirized Glee, Donald Glover's character on Community was a Jehovah's Witness, and of course they're not allowed to celebrate Christmas, or birthdays, which also came up in the show. And Donald Glover is very upset about this because everyone else was very keen on Christmas. So how about it was put to him that you're celebrating Christmas undercover. You're an undercover Jehovah's Witness. So they did this rap on Community. If you've never seen the Glee episode of Community, it is truly outstanding. But I could go on about Community forever, but I won't. Okay, let's see what else we got here. Duck speaking and seal clapping. William Hicks says when he picked up his Peace Prize, didn't he try to lobby for Chicago getting the Summer Olympics? Laugh out loud. Good thing that didn't happen. Just think how things might have worked if. Chicago Summer Olympics, I don't see it somehow. Again, from Chococan 666, this type of comedy is analogous to postmodern art in that it is vacant sans the external narrative. Well, yes, exactly. I thought about this a lot, you know. Laughter is fairly natural. It's not the most natural emotion because anyone can fake laughter. I just faked it. I wasn't laughing at anything. I realized that embarrassment is the most natural emotion because embarrassment can't be faked. You can't bring the redness To your face. Hannah Gadsby. Thank you, William Stewart. Yeah, let's go to the comedy club tonight. What do we got? We have an angry Australian lesbian. Sounds great. Maybe we should buy tickets for people who don't have tickets. Heck McNeck says Norm Macdonald is the greatest comedian of the past 30 years. Well, he certainly is very good indeed. Justin Proto says, it seems that the commies' personalities are black and white, whereas the type. Well, yes, obviously nuance and delivery are enormously important because, again, give someone a laugh line, and some people can pull it off, some people can't. And some people can pull it off, and they get a little laugh. Some people do it, and they get a huge laugh. I'm reminded of John Candy, one of my favorite comedians. He was a man who could make people laugh without saying anything. On the second SCTV Christmas show, which was a parody of It's a Wonderful Life, they cut to this band which they'd introduced before with Martin Short doing a kind of Johnny Rotten impression. It was called the Queen Haters. And they had John Candy playing the drums. And they put a bald cap on him and I think these weird glasses or whatever, an earring. And he's just staring straight ahead. And he's very, very funny. I mean, perhaps that is sort of thing one is born with. William Hicks asks, is Bill Burr a conservative comedian per se? I don't know. Perhaps a reactionary comedian. I've been following him for quite a number of years, and a lot of his stuff is enormously funny. But I don't know. Was it the last of his comedy specials that I saw? He's clearly working through these serious problems from his childhood and being raised as a Catholic. And then in this special, he gets into these genocidal fantasies about killing, I don't know, what, 3/4 of the people on Earth because they're too stupid or whatever. And he was really veering into anti-comedy there. YT says, do Hollywood actors actually study acting? Most of them don't even know how to use their voice. They all just whisper without any affectation. It's a curious thing. You learn a lot when you listen to commentaries. Wes Anderson's commentary for the Royal Tenenbaums. He's talking about Ben Stiller demanding that there be a second camera in a scene. It's a chase scene. There's people chasing each other in a backyard. And Wes Anderson said, no, the coverage is fine. And Ben Stiller was demanding a second camera. And I thought, what, Ben Stiller is like the 4th or 5th billed actor on this movie, and he's bullying the director and demanding a second camera? Well, Wes Anderson got a second camera. He says in the commentary that I didn't use anything from the second camera. I had it all blocked out, so I only needed one camera. But again, when you may have heard that Henry Winkler won an Emmy for Barry, a show I'm very fond of, and I read an interview with him where he said that acting in this show was a bit of a shock to him, because he was told, you will read the lines as written. And maybe he'd never done this in his life, because apparently all these American actors, they improvise. You can see that in the whole any Judd Apatow film, any movie he's directed, or maybe even any movie he's produced, where you've got this improvisation going, and it goes on and on and on, and the jokes get weaker and weaker and weaker, because you don't want to argue with the talent, I guess. Well, why don't you want to argue with the talent? I sweated blood to write the script, which I think is pretty good, and you were just going to make something up on the fly, and it's going to be better? Kubrick, Stanley Kubrick, people would improvise on his movies, and he'd say, no, wait. That's great. Let's write this down. Let's put it into the script. The best parts of your improvisation we will put in the script. Because improvisation is really, I don't know, if you say 4 jokes in an improvisation and one of them hits, that's a pretty good ratio for improvisation. But you don't want that in a movie. Going back to Kubrick again, I could talk about Kubrick for hours, but one of the things that most impressed me reading about him was when he took over the direction of Spartacus. He didn't really like to be attached to that movie because it wasn't his conception. I suppose it was more Kirk Douglas's conception than anything else. But they had all these great actors in the film. You know, they had Laurence Olivier and Charles Laughton and Peter Ustinov. And he would see them on the stage, and they'd be walking back and forth, and they'd be muttering to each other. And Kubrick, growing up where he did, he thought this was some sort of plot against him. I mean, the first director had been fired, so maybe he's going to get fired too. And finally, he made inquiries. Why are they wandering around muttering in this way? And he was told they're learning their lines. Learning their lines? Oh, this is novel. So these British actors, they actually know their lines? Know them in the sense that the lines are internalized, rather than just sort of, forcing them out and stumbling over them. No, they know the lines. And this explains why, Kubrick was famous, or notorious, if you will, for all of the takes. Well, he'd get through 10 or 20 takes with the actors, and the reason that he went through 10 or 20 takes with the actors is because they didn't know their lines. They hadn't internalized them. They're stumbling, hesitating over their lines. That's why one of the reasons why he liked working with British actors so much. James Mason, he thought the world of James Mason. And actors like Philip Stone, say, and Murray Melvin, they knew their lines. And look, you go to a comedy club, and maybe someone starts riffing or whatever, and it's like you laugh, right? Well, if you put this in a movie, it's supposed to last, right? It's not an ephemeral experience where you have the contact high of other people laughing. And you've also, paid money to go to a comedy club, so you're supposed to laugh. People are going to be seeing a movie in a cold room, in an empty theater. They're going to be watching it on TV or whatever, so it has to be good. William Hicks, John Candy in Stripes. The doctor said I swallowed a lot of aggression. Yes. Poor John Candy. He died far too young. Halper says, I remember KMG tweeting that Kieran Hines is the best, or one of the best actors of today. Well, he's certainly my favorite. Certainly since the death of Philip Seymour Hoffman. Let's see. There's the 2 actors called Isaacs. And there is one English actor who would be right up there with Kieran Hines for me. He was in that Australian woman's version of Peter Pan. He's just absolutely outstanding. I suppose that's a test for an actor, whether you can do, both parts, the husband part and Captain Hook. Jason Isaacs. That guy is just an absolute marvel. Of course, when I'm talking, and of course, and just all the different roles he's played. When he played Zhukov in The Death of Stalin, this guy can play anything, But I suppose that's the sort of difference between American view of acting and, I don't know, British view of acting. That acting is supposed to imply versatility, whereas acting in the United States, creating a persona and then repeating that persona. It said of John Ford that when Ford was in a film by Howard Hawks, perhaps Rio Bravo, that Ford said, I never knew the son of a bitch could act. Well, you see far more range with John Wayne than you see with today's leading men. Heck McNeck says Kevin in acting class, his love for Barry makes more sense to me now. Well, I love Barry for all sorts of reasons. I suppose Alec Berg. It's an Alec Berg production. That guy is gold. Everything he touches turns to gold. Is Alone Together good? I'm not familiar with Alone Together. Sorry. The Fonz was cool. Um, I was actually rather alerted to the fact that Henry Winkler could actually act when he was in an episode of King of the Hill, in which he played Henry Winkler. That they'd retconned the story such that Hank's wife, Peggy, came from what, Montana? I think it was Montana or Wyoming. Come from a ranch there. And the joke was that all these rich people, Larry David and all these people, they were buying these huge plots of land. And so it was becoming very Hollywood. And Henry Winkler was, he had this enormous porch, and he'd sit alone on his porch and he'd play a Thelonious Monk at just, know, tremendous volume. So it carried over the whole valley. And so Hank went there to try and talk him into the scheme that Peggy had, which involved cattle, which I won't go into. But Henry Winkler was so, say, in love with himself that he wasn't really listening to any of it, and he was just talking about Thelonious Monk and how great Thelonious Monk was. And I thought, wow, this guy can act. That is, that's good. Yes, these pretzels are making me thirsty. And that's the instruction, enter laughing. And the gag is all the many different ways that one could enter, a scene. Yes, I don't know. That is a David, I think the world of, that scene in the hospital where hysterical or whatever, and, the people in the hospital, they're converging on him to dial down his anguish for reasons of self-preservation. That with Steve Coogan and Rob Brydon. And Steve Coogan, he says that there's still a bit of the Yorkshire burr in his voice, and that just increased my already enormous admiration for Steve Coogan. That, wow, he's really thought this out. It's like his impersonations are built from the ground up. Quachalango says, "What's with the creeps in Montana and Wyoming anyway?" Well, I guess the land was cheap. Well, it once was cheap, and you could be alone out there. That was one of the jokes on the Larry Sanders Show, that he had this place in Montana, and he retired, and he went to Montana, and he was utterly, utterly miserable. I suppose, I guess what you want to be is alone together, right? Oh, well, yeah, just a couple of miles away, Larry David lives, or whoever, right, with their spread. Because you don't want to hang out with these people who live there, because they're completely alien to your experience. I mean, normals are mostly completely alien to an actor's experience, but normals in New York or in Los Angeles are one thing compared to normals in Montana or Wyoming. That, I don't know, maybe you think they want to kill you or something. I remember reading years ago about Ben Stein, the writer and actor, who's of course did Ferris Bueller and many, many commercials. And he bought this place in Idaho. And of course, Ben Stein is Jewish. And so he wrote about how had this residual fear that if you went to, Idaho, that they're all going to kill him, because that's what they do in Idaho. But actually, Ben Stein is a good guy, and he fell in love with the people in Idaho. Chokakin666 says, "I like when Peggy became a big foot fetish model." Yeah, that was a very funny and sad episode. Sidney Pollack played the pornographer in it. What did he say? Give me your social, bring out those floppers and let's make some money. You say that there's a certain type of deeply self-hating man that will pay top dollar for this. Yeah, you're all aware of the rumor that Sidney Pollack is the person actually responsible for Eyes Wide Shut. Of course, he was one of the actors in it and a famed director himself. Amusingly, and this is, Pollack said this himself, that when he was filming Eyes Wide Shut, and it's, well, how long did that shoot last? A year and a half? That, I don't know, he had a camera, fooling around with a camera, and Stanley Kubrick, who had been a staff photographer as a teenager for Look magazine, told Sidney Pollack how to take pictures. And I thought, I guess that would take a lot of confidence because, Pollack, what, Academy Award winning director or whatever, that no, I'm going to tell you how to take pictures. You don't know how to take pictures. And the one thing that I learned from that I suppose could be useful is that Kubrick told Pollack, never use a flash. Never, ever, ever use a flash. So, what in this rough and ready show do we have? Oh, yes, let's talk about teachers. I'm sorry, not teachers, educators. We all love educators, don't we? This is a story from the New York Times from today, which reads like a parody, as so much of the New York Times does. And it is a story by Eliza Shapiro, who appears to be a black woman, curiously enough. Yeah. You're seeing a lot of this these days. Have you noticed this? These black Jewish or Jewish black hybrids. One would think that's a very rare combination, but most of them seem to migrate to the media or into show business. Here's the essence of this story. You may think I'm making it up, but I'm not. Which is that educators, were perfectly happy. In fact, they were looking forward to actually teaching, in front of live students again. Then they found out that Donald Trump was in favor of this. And no, that scared them off. No, we can't do this anymore. Donald Trump is in favor of this. And the old joke about that if you found out that Hitler said that you should brush your teeth, then you wouldn't brush your teeth anymore because Hitler said it? Yeah, well, that's where we are. What's the subhead? Oh, here's the head. How Trump's push to reopen schools backfired. The subhead, distrust of the president and his motives hardened the conviction of some educators that teaching in person was unsafe, helping drive union opposition. Yeah, it's as if the unions need an excuse for stupid, truculent obstruction. No, I don't think so. In June, with the coronavirus crisis appearing to hit a lull in the United States, teachers and parents around the country finally began feeling optimistic about reopening schools in the fall. Going back into the classroom seemed possible. Districts started to pull together plans. Then came a tweet. Schools must open in the fall. Black caps, 3 exclamation points. Trump declared July 6th, voicing a mantra he would repeat again and again in the coming weeks with varying degrees of threat as he sought to jumpstart the nation's flagging economy. Maybe this wasn't so much about jumpstarting the nation's flagging economy as, teaching children, which had been abandoned for several months with no end in sight. Around the same time, caseloads in much of the country started to climb again. In the weeks since, hundreds of districts, including nearly all of the nation's largest school systems, along with scores of rural and suburban districts, have reversed course and decided to start the school year with remote instruction. By some estimates, at least half of the nation's children will now spend a significant portion of the fall or longer learning in front of their laptops, which raises the obvious question, what about poor students? What about those students whose parents don't have enough money to buy them laptops? What are they supposed to do? I suppose there are people in the United States so poor that they can't even afford an internet connection. What do they do? Rising infection rates were clearly the major driver of the move to continue remote learning. Yeah, perhaps. Perhaps the teachers for several months had gotten used to getting paid for not going to work. And they thought, I like this. This is a good life. What I put in an hour or two of distance learning every day, and I'm still getting my 60, 70, 80, 90, $100,000 a year. That's a sweet gig. If you had told me that Trump was doing this as a favor to the schools must not open crowd, I'd believe you, said Rick Hess, the director of education policy at the American Enterprise Institute, a conservative think tank. Yes, a conservative think tank, thereby useless. Again, I don't want to sound overly formal or prissy, but Mr. Hess, if his pals want to call him Rick, well, obviously, none of my business. But let's say if I were being quoted by the New York Times as an expert in the subject of education, I would go by the appellation Richard. All right? Indeed, as the president has pushed for schools to reopen key constituencies, parents and educators, why not teachers? Is teacher a word that is lower status? Really? Apparently it is. Have largely moved in the other direction. A July poll by Education Week found that roughly 60% of educators said the pandemic had worsened their view of Trump. Really? Yeah, okay. I'm going to bet that teachers, okay, I'm going to go out on a limb here. I'm going to say that teachers, that is to say K to 12 teachers in the United States, voted 75% favor Hillary in 2016. I mean, I could look it up, I guess, but that would be my guess. A recent Washington Post poll found that parents disapprove of Mr. Trump's handling of school reopening by a 2/3 majority. Yes, again, quelle surprise. And a new Gallup poll showed that fewer parents want their children to return to school buildings now than they did in the spring. Teachers' unions, which tend to support Democrats, they do? I had no idea. And have been among Trump's strongest critics, spent most of the spring after schools shuttered on the defensive, trying to appease their nervous members without alienating parents exhausted by remote learning. But Trump's intervention may have helped shift the political dynamic in their favor. Leanne Power Jimenez, yes, that's her name, Leeanne, Leanne Power Jimenez, the vice president of the Tulsa Classroom Teachers Association, a member of the state union's Republican caucus, said she was frustrated by Trump's approach to reopening, which she characterized as more focused on the economy than on teachers' health and safety. Teachers need to hear that our lives are important, Ms. Jimenez said, adding that the president's push to reopen would help inform how she votes in November. Oh, I see. Trump apparently wants me to work for my pay. I'm not voting for him then. At an event at the White House on Wednesday, the president called teachers' union leaders disgraceful. There's widespread agreement on most points of the political spectrum that a functioning American economy requires working schools. Not really. It doesn't, because students contribute nothing to the economy, nothing directly, perhaps indirectly. And if teachers are being paid for not teaching, then the GDP is doing just fine. Presumably in the years to come, sometime in the future, then uneducated children might negatively impact the GDP, but right now they make no difference whatsoever. In any event, the abrupt, unplanned shift to remote learning was disastrous for many children who desperately need in-person instruction. But even conservatives, yeah, those quizlings, who said they agreed with the president's focus on reopening schools, say he's been a poor spokesman for the cause. They pointed to Trump's downplaying of the danger posed by the virus. What danger? Yeah? Can we have some quantitative arguments here? Can we get some empirical evidence here? No, apparently we're not going to. Followed by his threats to withhold federal aid to districts that did not reopen classrooms as potentially alienating to centrist and even right-of-center teachers and parents. I thought it was really good and useful to have someone with a big megaphone make those arguments, Rick Hess said. But he made them in such a five-thumb, unserious, reckless way. Oh, the reckless way of saying, why are we paying you if you are not working? Yeah, that's how reckless Trump was. Many teachers and their powerful unions said they saw Trump's language as bullying, wrong-headed, and out of touch with the reality that the virus was raging through their communities, often in red states. Yeah, okay. Teachers' unions have played a decisive role over the summer in shaping decisions on reopening by raising alarms about health and safety, some of which have been tied to Trump's insistence that the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention's guidelines on safe school reopening were too strict. Teachers have threatened to conduct sick-outs or strikes and have already filed a lawsuit to block reopening in Florida, where the virus is raging. Oh, it's raging, is it? How many people are being hospitalized there? How many people are in ICU? How many people are dying? No, this is a story about teachers. We don't need empirical evidence. We don't need your stinking empirical evidence. Jadir, a White House spokesman, said unions and Democratic leaders were seizing upon schools as a way to attack the president. President Trump's goal of seeing schools open was never about politics. It was about the health, growth, and learning of our nation's children, and it has not backfired, Deere said. Not only does the president want to see schools open safely, but so do teachers, students, parents, and health professionals. I don't understand any of this for this reason, okay? Now, anyone who's ever been a teacher, anyone who's ever worked in the school environment, as I have for several years, anyone who's ever been a student knows that public schools are disease factories, both bacterial and viral. But now it's different because we have a virus. It's a new virus. In fact, it's called the novel coronavirus. Look, if these teachers want to wear masks, okay, if they want to show up to school in hazmat suits, let them do it. But apparently that is not sufficient. I don't know, perhaps they'll brush against some 7-year-old, or some 7-year-old will touch their hand, and then they will be diseased, and then they will blacken and shrivel and die. Is that how it's supposed to work? Perhaps nowhere was Trump's impact on the debate more clear than in Chicago. Oh, Chicago. Yes, we're really talking about middle America here. We're really talking about, the most corrupt city in the most corrupt county in America. But let's talk about Chicago. When the local teachers union surveyed its members about reopening in June, a little over half said they were extremely uncomfortable returning to the classroom. Oh dear, oh dear. Teachers have been forced, in practically every jurisdiction now, to get a Bachelor of B.Ed degree. It's not necessary. Any reasonably intelligent adult can teach elementary school. Yeah. And any, I don't know, 110 IQ adult can teach high school. Okay. You get your BA degree and they tell you about, teaching strategies and prioritizing them. And people I've known who got BA degrees, I remember, one of them was forced to read one of the most famous personal accounts of the Holocaust, Primo Levi, I think. Oh yeah. Oh, the death, the mass death, the terror, the panic. What does this have to do with teaching school children, how to read or arithmetic? Hmm? Because I'm not getting it. It's almost as if they're just filling in the hours. Uh, let's see, that number rose up to nearly 80% in recent weeks, said Jesse Sharkey, the union's president, as infection rates ticked up in the city. And Trump continued to push schools to reopen in tweets and at news conferences. When the president began highlighting successful school reopenings in Scandinavian countries with very low virus rates, maybe this had to do with the Scandinavian countries not locking people down, building up herd immunity. Sharkey said that did a tremendous amount to undermine the credibility about a safe reopening. It wasn't based on scientific or health criteria. It was based on political expediency. And it didn't help that it was Trump. Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot announced last week that the school year would begin online only. The American Federation of Teachers, which is an organization which has stood, I don't know, athwart children and education for decades, saying stop, surveyed members in mid-June and found that about three-quarters were at least somewhat willing to return to classrooms with proper safety precautions. The numbers dropped significantly, said Randy Weingarten, the union's president. Hey, again, going back to what I was saying, given that any reasonably intelligent adult can teach grade school, and any adult, say with an IQ of 110, can teach high school, if these teachers don't want to work, why don't we just bust their unions? That's simple. Bust their unions. Do you know people get master's degree and PhDs in education? Did you know that? People who want to be principals of schools, they will get the master's degree and the PhD because you need to know all this theory. Apparently, how to warehouse children. Apparently, that's a very theoretical job. But no, I can understand these people. If you spent several months getting your salary for essentially not working, why would you want to go back to work? Particularly when the Democratic Party and the media is running interference for you. Back to Clapter, says Quackalango. Okay, sounds like a serial killer name. Anything with Lee. Yeah. The Lee in the middle, or maybe the Lee at the end. Yeah, that's very much a serial killer name. DB Cooper says, I'm beginning to feel more optimistic about the election, but I'm afraid of a market crash right before the election. Yeah, but who would bring about the market crash? Because it's, oh yeah, we're going to collapse the Dow Jones, say, by 20%, And then, but there's the people who own these shares, which are largely institutions now. And, if your shares go down 20%, there's no guarantee that they're going to come back again. In fact, this could be, look at what happened in 1929 and lots of other times that people panic and they just start selling and selling and selling. I don't know that this is all that easy to arrange. YT says, ha 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 ha, I know a few teachers, some of the most effed up people. I worked at the University of British Columbia for 12 years, and I ran into a lot of people there that I'd gone to high school with. And my experience was that the people who had got like C plus grades, they tried really hard, and the best they could do was C plus. Keep in mind, this was before grade inflation. They all went into education. Then when I ran into education students and what they were actually doing with their time, and I learned, the measure of their intelligence. They're not very bright. They're not very bright at all. And then, of course, when I learned that the people at the education faculties at a place like the University of British Columbia, how obviously and deeply sinister they were, I got a very jaundiced view of this. So what are we going to talk about now? Okay, we're going to talk about Canada. Okay. There have been a bunch of stories that I haven't got to, so this is going to be the clean this out. I'm looking at a picture of Catherine McKenna, who is a well, she's infrastructure and communities minister. That doesn't sound like a serious portfolio. What does that mean? Infrastructure and communities. Does that have like a real world name? Anyway, she used to be environment minister until about a year ago, and she was nicknamed Climate Barbie. And I suppose she was nicknamed Climate Barbie because she is an extraordinarily good-looking woman. I'm looking at this, she's like 47 years old, and I'm thinking, wow, wow. I mean, she's better looking than 90% of women on Earth, and she's 47 years old. And it's difficult for me to stay angry at a woman who is this good looking. But apparently, people are mean to her. They were mean to her when they called her Climate Barbie, and they're even meaner now. The Ottawa Police Hate Crimes Unit is investigating after a man screamed obscenities outside Infrastructure and Communities Minister Catherine McKenna's constituency office last week. A 90-second video posted to social media over the weekend shows a man approaching the door of the Ottawa Centre MP's Catherine Street office around 10:30 a.m. and ringing the bell. It appears the man recorded the video himself. When a female employee opens the door, the man asks to speak to McKenna, but she tells him the office isn't open to the public due to the COVID-19 pandemic. The man launches into a profane tirade, at once calling McKenna well, it begins with C, and I'm not going to repeat it, you know what it means, before the woman shuts the door. This is a CBC story, and it doesn't say why this man was angry. Why he was angry is that $10 billion have been given her department for infrastructure projects, because she's the infrastructure minister, and $5 billion of that is unaccounted for. And what this man is saying is pretty much that I'm a taxpayer, I pay money for this, the money has disappeared, and you don't have an answer for that, and he's angry. Oh, okay, so McKenna addressed the unacceptable incident outside that same constituency office Monday afternoon. Quote, this isn't an isolated incident. It's not just involving me, my staff members, my family. Too often there are incidents against politicians, often female politicians, she said. Oh, I see. Look, all politicians get death threats. All politicians are delivered ugly mail, email, voicemail announcements, etc., etc. It's part of the territory. But you know, we've been told for decades now that women are just as good as men, and I don't believe it, because if they were just as good as men, then they would take their lumps like their male colleagues do. Oh, women are attacked on their looks. Oh, because men are never attacked on their looks? When Joe Clark, who later became Prime Minister, was leader of the Conservative Party of Canada, he changed the parting of his hair from right to left, or vice versa. There was an enormous amount of press speculation and snickering about this. Joe Clark seems to have, his blood is very close to his skin, rosacea, perhaps, like Bill Clinton. And people mocked him for his appearance. I mean, he was an ugly man to begin with, and, you know, he had this mottled skin, and people made fun of him. But I don't know, let's look at Donald Trump. He's orange bad man. He's orange. He has ridiculous comb-over hair, which is obviously fake. And he has small pans, and you know what that means. He has a small penis. Are you seriously kidding me? That male politicians are not mocked for their looks? People are far more likely to mock a man for their looks than they are to mock a woman for her looks, because of sort of residual courtliness amongst the population. It's considered to be not the done thing to mock a woman for her looks, where it is very much the done thing to mock a man for his looks. Al Gore was mocked for his looks. He was mocked for his voice. I mean, I could come up with any number of examples, but no, women are just as good as men, perhaps better. Well, obviously better. But no, don't say mean things to us because you're picking on us because we're women. McKenna vowed such incidents wouldn't discuss the question, saying if she knew before she entered public office what she knows now about the harassment and abuse politicians face, she may have thought twice about running. Really? Really? Did you talk to anyone about this? Anyone in politics? Because they would have set you straight right from the very beginning. Did you talk to, like, say, journalists? Your husband, Catherine McKenna's husband, is a prominent Canadian journalist who writes about politics. He could have set her straight. It's an ugly business, and it's a trade-off. People say mean things about you, and you get to spend billions of dollars of taxpayers' money and order people what to do. That is the trade-off. If you're not willing to make the trade-off, well, then why did you get into politics? Yeah, well, okay. Let's look at this story here. The vice president of Huawei, who is being held under house arrest in Canada, there was a rally for her, and guess what? It was all made up. Meng Wanzhou, her name is. This is a story from 4 days ago. Joey Zhang's cell phone number has been the point of contact for some odd and sometimes dodgy ventures across the country, whether she's running a spa that is never open in rural Saskatchewan. That's funny right there, okay? The spa that is never open in rural Saskatchewan. You could build a whole sitcom around that. Offering phony jobs to Chinese nationals seeking to immigrate to Canada, pretending to run a registered aesthetics school north of Toronto. Again, comedy gold. Or helping to organize a fake political protest outside BC's Supreme Court. The same 10 digits have often been on the signs, in the ads, and shared in chats. For the past 10 years, Joey Zhang, also known as Shu Fang, has created more than 30 businesses in a wide range of industries, from retail to hemp farming to immigration services. The companies were located in Saskatchewan and Ontario. The pace at which she created companies was sometimes frantic. For example, in just a 6-month period in 2011, she created 6 companies and claimed 3 different residential addresses in Regina and Saskatoon. And Saskatoon is a comedy name. You know, like the hard K sound, like Mucklach. A CBC News investigation of her companies found many of them likely only existed on paper. The CBC reached out to her on multiple occasions through the 306 phone number to ask her about her business practices, but she declined to comment. In 2012, the Saskatchewan government flagged 7 of Joey Zhang's companies that offered jobs to Chinese nationals seeking to immigrate to Canada. According to internal documents, the job offers would have helped the applicants to qualify for permanent residency. But Saskatchewan immigration officials determined the jobs were fake and denied the applications. Joey Zhang's immigration consultant, John Cheng, was suspended for 2 years from participating in Saskatchewan's immigration system in 2013. CBC has learned that in other cases, Joey Zhang was offering Chinese nationals the opportunity to become a permanent resident by investing in one of her businesses. Her connection to this extensive collection of companies came to the CBC's attention through her cell phone number, the same number that linked her to a sham protest earlier this year outside a politically explosive court hearing involving Canada, the US, and China. Of course, the obvious question is, why is this fraudster still in my country? Why is she still here? A pretty good idea. But apparently there's nothing we can do about that. Now, this is something that I've been, how long is this? Eight days old. I've been saving this for a while, and it's about this woman, Shri Pradkar, the Toronto Star, one of Canada's top opinion mongers, who confessed a couple of years ago that until she came to Canada, she didn't know that she was not white. She actually wrote that. The hubris of the Brahmins. And this woman, for the last 2 or 3 years, has been operating under a really serious delusion that she is black. I don't mean that her skin is dark. I suppose you could say that Shri Pradkar has kind of copper-colored skin, but that she is as one with Afro-American blacks, or that is to say, descendants of slavery. Now, obviously she isn't, but she becomes more emboldened over time. She wrote, there are a few reasons Oprah Winfrey has been a problematic symbol of black success. Calling out white privilege ain't one of them. That's what she wrote. Ain't one of them. Yeah. Because she's folksy. See, if you're getting down with the black folk, you gotta be folksy. You gotta start using words like ain't. And you got to use the apostrophe instead of the th, and you got to drop your g's, just to let them know that you're on their side. But the kind of nuance is likely wasted on Republicans, such as Ted Cruz, once a presidential contender, who on Wednesday accused the billionaire of spewing utter racist BS in a tweet for lecturing the rest of us about whiteness. Winfrey is the embodiment of a capitalist definition of success. Wouldn't that just be kind of like an ordinary definition of success? That you are fabulously wealthy. Also, that you are enormously influential. I mean, under what system would this not be considered a definition of success? I don't know. Perhaps if you want to get into the question of morality, I suppose. But is that common these days? The quintessential rags to riches story that is inspirational but limited. How is it limited? Please explain. It's a story that defines pathways to success in linear terms of class at the expense of race. Oh, I'm sorry. Did Oprah Winfrey, put Pond's cold cream on her face to pretend to be white? Because Oprah Winfrey, for as long as I have known of her, which is 40 years or something, has been black 24/7. Black. She sealed her position as the undisputed talk show queen after her wildly successful 25-year-long Oprah Winfrey Show wrapped up in 2011. She returned to those talk show roots last week with a new show called The Oprah Conversations that streamed on Apple TV. In one episode, she was joined by Emmanuel Acho, former NFL linebacker and host of the YouTube series Uncomfortable Conversations with a Black Man. Winfrey and Acho, who converse with white and Latinx guests, yes, of course, Latinx, unpacked, give it a rest. Unpacked the concept, you could have said explained, but we don't do explaining anymore. We unpack things. Unpacked the concept of white privilege after one white male guest said not all white people have power, a common misperception among people that privilege suggests luxury or an easy life. It does not, of course. Well, actually, it does. Actually, it does. If your life is miserable, and your life is miserable, I don't know, because of your class, then you can clearly not be said to have privilege. Because privilege means, vaulting over obstacles. That's what it means. I'm going to wager, says Shri Pradkar, who lectures Canadians on equality while appearing in public wearing a caste mark on her forehead that more people today understand better than they did, say, 5 years ago, that white privilege simply means a white person may face barriers to success, but their white skin isn't one of them. White supremacy, the oppressive basis on which colonizers annexed or settled on lands not their own, ensures that a dominion. This is a woman who is an immigrant from India. And she's lecturing us on privilege. She is talking to us about colonizers. Of course, when the colonizers, including my own family, the Grace family, came to this country, it was mostly a vast wilderness, which was tamed by the colonizers, such that, oh yes, and these colonizers died in large numbers in World War I and World War II, such that interlopers like Shri Pradkar could come to my country and rent seek to get paid handsomely for telling us, the people who built this country, how horrible we are. How will we know when things have changed? Well, when people like her don't have jobs anymore. When people like her have to beg forgiveness for what they have said and done. When people like her have to beg not to be deported back to their home countries. Again, she's not black. And of course, the black experience in Canada is, well, vestigial to our national history. It is unlike the black experience in America. It's not just that, she thinks that she's American black, which makes it even funnier. This is from the Canadian Press. Leadership apologizes after report finds systemic racism at Human Rights Museum. What? Racism at a Human Rights Museum? This is the Canadian Museum for Human Rights in Winnipeg, or the Skoll, Canadian History. The Asper family, who owned various media properties. Izzy Asper, who I interviewed once, a very amusing man, that started Global TV, which became Canada's third television network. And so they decided to build a Human Rights Museum. Well, yeah, what does that mean, Human Rights Museum? War Museum, I get that. Holocaust Museum, I get that. Many other examples, sure. Human Rights Museum? Why would people go to such a place? Well, I'll tell you, because the government pays for them to go. That this was such an obvious non-starter, but the Aspers, they owned the National Post at the time, and other papers, a whole host of other papers, and so politicians were afraid of them. First, the Liberal Party and the Conservative Party decided essentially to pay for a private museum, because this is a private museum. And then they decided to pay for, tens of thousands of school children every month to be bused to this place, the Skoll in the cold. And if you look at pictures of the Canadian Museum for Human Rights, it looks like a modernist take on a Prussian helmet, circa 1914. That's what it looks like. But in any event, systemic racism and other mistreatment is pervasive at the Winnipeg institution. I apologize that it took a public crisis for the organization to seriously reflect on the issues of systemic racism, homophobia, and other forms of oppression, said Pauline Rafferty, the museum's board chair and interim CEO. The third-party report reviewed allegations of racism, homophobia, and censorship by current and former employees. The museum closed Wednesday and Thursday to give staff an opportunity to review the report. After the museum posted images of a Justice for Black Lives rally in June, stories from employees were posted online by a group called CMHR Stop Lying. Current and former employees responded that it was hypocritical in the museum to bring up the Black Lives rally because of racism they faced at work. Employees also wrote about having to censor displays about alphabet people history at the request of some school groups who visited the museum. Winnipeg lawyer Laurel Harris conducted the review, and a report found racism is systemic at the museum in its employment practices, policies, and in the actions of employees. The report said that racism had a negative physical, emotional, and financial impact on employees who are Black, Indigenous, and other people of color, rather. Harris also found instances of sexism and homophobia. The report said staff who worked directly with the public were extremely diverse, but the vast majority of management was white and heterosexual. Boo! And created a cultural schism with upper-level managers less attuned to the impact of race, sex, and gender identity. Yes, it is schism and not schism. I know I've been accused of mispronouncing words or pronouncing them not in the North American fashion, but look it up. SCHISM is properly pronounced schism. I got a pretty good idea how this works. It's a shakedown. You get a Black employee, preferably a Black homosexual who takes offense, who hasn't been promoted. Oh, I don't know, someone gave her a dirty look, or perhaps didn't look at her at all. And that's really all that it takes, because obviously if you're at the Canadian Museum for Human Rights, you're not going to be able to withstand any such accusations. You simply can't. It can't be done. They built a box and trapped themselves in it. Mary Crow says, or we need to have a conversation in a nuanced way to unpack your privilege that is problematic. Right? Metal Mike says at the gift shop you can buy abortion Barbie, fetus with severed head sold separately. Again, I can't get mad at this woman. One often hears about politicians being attractive. There's very few good-looking women in politics. And when you say a woman in politics is good-looking, you say, yeah, under the right light, whatever, sort of, if you're kind. Catherine McKenna is gorgeous. And perhaps that's a defect on my part, that a woman as good-looking as that. I don't know. I'm loath to criticize her. But in any event, we are moving on to the book club, not the book club, Theater Thursday. The book club is tomorrow, which is canceled. We are talking about Krzysztof Kieslowski's Decalogue, which is a series of 10 films, roughly an hour long, which he made for Polish television in 1988. And I'm looking at Wikipedia here, and the budget for all 10 episodes was $100,000. That's $10,000 per episode. Now, keep in mind, this was, we're talking about a government production. But if you look at the recent Blu-rays of Decalogue, and there are two contenders here. There's the Criterion edition, and Criterion is going to be good. It's always good. But then there is the edition that I have, which was produced by Arrow Films last year, and it's better. It's better. In terms of the features, in terms of what you get technically, in terms of the number of discs, etc., etc., etc. Of course, there's the question of region compatibility, right? And I guess you'd need all regions a Blu-ray player again. But as I've mentioned many times on Theater Thursday, that if you're a serious cinephile, that's what you need. That is what you need. It looks great. It was filmed for Polish TV in 1988, and it looks great. Now, famously, Kieslowski, I should mention, of course, that Krzysztof Piskiewicz was the co-writer of all 10 episodes. I don't want to minimize his contribution. Kieslowski was going to find different directors for all the 10 episodes. He was going to direct one and find other directors, but he fell so much in love with the material, he decided to direct them all. Now, there are 10 different cinematographers, and it's been pointed out by people who are more technically adept than me that there's considerable variance in the quality of the cinematography. I would have to point to one particular critic who talked about, how would I say, deficiencies in, this would be, hang on, the film Sufi. Deficiencies, for instance, in episode 8, with a lot of handheld stuff, a lot of shaky cam, a lot of unnecessary zooms, and really extreme close-ups, as opposed to, say, the cinematography in episode 9, which is the framing of which is quite outstanding. But of course, Decalogue refers to the Ten Commandments. And was Kieslowski a Christian? Was he a Catholic? I don't know. The evidence seems to be ambiguous in that regard. Kieslowski was obviously deeply influenced by Catholicism. It would be difficult to be a Pole and not be so, but he seemed to have a rather personalized theology, if you will. I've seen his gravestone. It has a cross on it, you know. But you're not going to get, this isn't, how would I say, it's not the Baltimore Catechism. It's not the Penny Catechism, all right? It is, and the commandments are often, their attachment to the episodes are often somewhat oblique. I think that would be a good way of saying it. Now, this begins with Decalogue 6, which is, thou shalt not commit adultery. Of course, you know, in the Catholic faith and the Christian faith generally, the sixth commandment refers more generally to sexual sins of impurity. And this is what episode 6 is about. And of course, episode 6 raises the question, a serious modern question is, what is the purpose of sexual intercourse or any kind of sexual expression? Is it fun? Is it simply fun? Is it simply a divertissement? Does it have any kind of deeper purpose? What is the connection between sex and love? Is there any kind of connection? Is there a default connection, or is this a connection that should exist, or one that we make in our minds, or that we take from tradition? And of course, this episode is about voyeurism, because it's about a peeper. And the peeper is a man called Atomic. And he becomes, he steals a telescope to spy on a neighbor. Of course, all of the episodes of Decalogue are filmed in the same vast, hideous, brutalist apartment complex in Warsaw. Kieslowski pointed out that this, you know, as far as housing in Warsaw goes, this was, you know, pretty good. But of course, it looks monstrous to us. And so many, well, even the housing, for instance, in episode 10, the housing that a well-off businessman lives into, it looks like a set of an expressionist film from the 1920s. And these cars, they're three-stroke cars that sound like lawnmowers, but keep in mind, This is communist Poland in the mid-1980s. So Tomek doesn't have any parents. This is a theme that runs through Decalogue: the importance of having parents, or the importance of not having parents. Um, Kieslowski is conservative in the sense that, well, he understands the point of having parents, and the point of having parents that love and care about you, and the point of demonstrating one's commitment to one's husband or wife with children, you know, the old-fashioned way. Anyway, Tomek doesn't have any parents, and he lives with an old woman who is his godmother. As I say, he becomes obsessed with an older woman, a woman who is, I would say, roughly twice his age. Her name is Magda, and she is a very glamorous woman. Certainly, to a naive 19-year-old, she would just be the epitome of glamour. She seems to do whatever she wants. He works for a living. He works at the post office. Later, he takes a job delivering milk in the morning. And milk, Kieslowski seems to be tremendously impressed with milk. You see milk in all of these films. But this woman, Magna, seems to exist in another world. That's perhaps part of the reason why Tomek becomes obsessed with her. And Magda is, shall we say, promiscuous, highly promiscuous. But Tomek is he's a very naive young man, and he falls in love with her. He doesn't know very much about sex. I suppose he's a virgin, but he has an idealized view of a woman, women in his head, and she is at the head of that ideal. So he seeks to get closer to her whatever way he can, which involves deception. And this involves Tomek in much embarrassment, for instance, getting beaten up by one of her boyfriends. But Magda is quite taken with Tomek because he is the opposite of the men that she normally consorts with. And so she begins to play games with him. And she asks, "What do you want from me?" And he says nothing. He just wants to be with her. I mean, it sounds ridiculous that there would be men like this, there were ever men like this, but it wasn't all that unusual, not that long ago. I suppose it would have been far more usual in, say, Poland of the 1980s than it was, in the West of the 1980s. Communist societies were very old-fashioned, very repressive societies. The sexual license that we take for granted here and that is taken for granted everywhere in the West now was not the case in the Eastern Bloc regimes. So Magda finds herself in a kind of relationship with Tomek, which is a relationship which ends up being exceedingly humiliating for him, especially in a sexual sense. Whereupon he tries to kill himself. Suicide is a theme that runs throughout the Decalogue. I don't know, perhaps because Kieslowski, was taught as a Catholic that suicide is it's really the only unforgivable sin. Now, Kieslowski remade episode 6 as a feature film called A Short Film About Love, and the actress who played Magda wanted a different ending, a more optimistic ending, which she got. So, there's two different takes on this. I prefer the original one. Here, she finds out he's in the hospital, and she finds out why. Quite taken with this, because a man, has tried to kill himself over me. Tomek is entirely chastened. And I have to say that people talk about episode number one being the saddest thing they've ever seen, and it is very sad, but episode six is exceedingly sad too. And the final line of the episode where Tomek says to her, "I'm not spying on you anymore," that may be the saddest line that I have ever heard. Now, Decalogue 7, thou shalt not steal, and the obvious question which is raised within the episode is, can you steal what belongs to you by nature and by right? And there is a woman that we meet. Well, the first thing that we hear is a wailing child, a screaming, seeming uncontrollable, hysterical child, and it is very disturbing. And what's perhaps more disturbing than anything else is that the residents of the house seem to be inured to this sound, and a child in distress. There are few things more difficult to listen to that, but obviously they've been hearing this for a long time. And we're introduced to a strange situation where there is a young woman. We find out she's 22 years old, and her name is Micah. And she's a blonde woman. She goes up to this blonde child who's 6 years old, and this child is in the throes of some sort of nightmare and won't wake up, won't be comforted. And finally, an older woman, Micah's mother, Eva, shows up and calms the child down and tells off Micah. Now, this mother is clearly in her 50s, and it seems odd that she has a 6-year-old child, and later we learn the truth. And the truth is that when she was 16 years old, Micah was seduced, or more likely seduced, a literature teacher in her school, of which her mother was the headmistress. And so a deal was arranged that the teacher would be allowed to disappear, that he would not be, the police would not be contacted for him having sexual relations with an underage girl. And in exchange, Micah would give the child to Eva, that the child would officially be Eva's, and Micah would pose as her sister. At the beginning of the episode, we discover that Micah has been expelled from university. And some bureaucratic functionary says, "What, don't you want to appeal?" And she says, "No, expelled is expelled." This is, I could say that most of the episodes of Decalogue are very hard to watch because one feels so much for Micah. She's not a very attractive woman. She's not a very intelligent woman. So much of what she does seems to be self-destructive, but she's obviously a young woman who's been brutalized by her mother from the inception. We learn that her mother wanted to have lots of children, but her mother suffered a significant physical damage when she was born, such that that was the only child she was ever going to have, that she would be infertile after this first birth. And so we see her lust for another child take the form of her stealing her own daughter's child. Micah has conceived a plan of running away to Canada, in fact. But there's a problem. She can only take her natural child with her if she gets the permission of that child's official mother, who of course is her mother, and this doesn't seem likely. And Micah has run into an impasse, which she decides to simply sweep aside. She kidnaps her own child. It is quite a harrowing scene. I should point out that Anya, her child is quite possibly the most adorable child I've ever seen in a movie. And the child has been taken by her would-be mother to a play at school, a pantomime. And part of the pantomime is that the children, they all jump on the stage and they all dance around with puppets, the big puppets. But Micah has insinuated herself into the back of the stage, and she manages to appear at the edge of the stage and summon Anya, and she grabs her and says that they're on an adventure. And we see her official mother. We see her growing panic, like her daughter has disappeared, and we see Micah delighting in this. The relationship between the mother and daughter is entirely poisonous, and it is difficult to root for either of them, given how horrible the behavior of each of them is to the other. And there's a curious thing, though, about Eva's behavior. Typically one would expect when a mother's child is abducted, because that's what it appears to be, that she would become hysterical on rather short notice. Now, she's quite disturbed, but she does not become hysterical, neither in the short term nor the long term. I suppose one can speculate is because, well, again, this is not her child, or she suspects that her daughter has taken her child back, or perhaps she, suspects that she somehow deserves this. So Micah flees to the countryside, where she meets Wojtek, who is the father of this child. Wojtek, as one might imagine, who hasn't seen this child since shortly after it was born, is not best pleased to see this, because the scandal that he went through ruined his life, and of course he was separated from his natural child from the beginning. But it is really impressive how Kieslowski works this out. As I say, this is such a beautiful child, and we see that the child quite takes to Wojtek. Wojtek was an aspiring writer who gave it up, and he now literally makes teddy bears in his shack out in the country. And he starts talking to this child, his own child, as a father might, making up stories for her, and she's delighted. She's exhausted. The child's exhausted by the journey, and she falls asleep. And then he is, I don't know, putting a blanket on her or some such, and she grabs one of his fingers like this, and she won't let go, and she won't let go, and she won't let go. She's been told that he was her father, but what does that mean? What does that mean to the 6-year-old? Because Micah had said that I am your mother, and she didn't really believe that. But you see that the connection between the daughter and the father is so instinctual. And Wojtek, who had been charmed by this child because, of her beauty, he's really taken aback, because there seems to be this visceral connection between them. And we saw that when they arrived, the mother and daughter arrived, that Wojtek wanted, the back of them as soon as possible. But now he's thinking this over. But Micah is very jealous. She seems to be jealous of this new connection with her daughter to her natural father. The distraught Eva Eva's husband calls Stefan, and he lies and says, no, they're not here. And he says, Wojtek says, look, you should go back to Warsaw, and then various things are talked about, you can live here, or, I'll move somewhere else. And Micah is not really she's not really fit to make any kind of decisions, and so she flees with the child, and she calls she calls her mother and makes a very serious threat that if you don't give me what I want, which is the certificate I need to move to Canada officially, then you'll never see this child again. And it's insinuated and then made very clear that she's thinking of killing her child in order to spite her mother. Again, thou shalt not steal. Uh, and it's really quite horrifying. And there is a search made for the child. And Wojtek is searching, and Eva and Stefan are searching. And Micah is determined to get out. She goes to a train station. It's not open yet. It's Sunday. They don't open till late. I want a train. Where to? Anywhere. She wants to go anywhere. She's got her passport, which has been approved for her, but not for her daughter. And the woman at the train station who lives there takes pity on her. It's cold outside. They let the mother and child in, and they sleep. And then Eva and Stefan show up, and the woman at the train station, she tries to hide them, but the child, now Anya, recognizes what she believes is her mother's voice, looks up, and the jig is up. There'd previously been a very harrowing scene where Micah had told Anya, "I am your mother. I am your mother. Call me Mama." She won't. She just keeps calling her Micah, and she breaks down in tears. And it's too late. This is a common thing. It used to be quite common that you would have these accidental, embarrassing births by teenage girls, and a ruse would be arranged where the mother would say, "Oh, well, yes, this is a late birth, gift of God, whatever. Yes, I'm 45 years old, and now I have a child. And, oh, yes, and this is her elder sister." Many, many such cases. Jack Nicholson grew up in such a house. But the ending is that Micah has to leave, or she believes she has to leave. And we see her daughter, her natural daughter, running alongside the train. She's completely mystified by what has happened. And, well, I don't know what happens to Micah. It doesn't seem like a happy ending. Let's put it that way. Decalogue 8, thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbor. This is the Holocaust episode of Decalogue. And this has been much in the news lately, that the Holocaust is a very sensitive subject for Polish people, especially since in recent years, apparently they've been blamed for it. Oh, it wasn't the Germans, it was the Polish, which is, of course, is a grotesque libel, because a great many Poles gave their lives to shield Jews during the Second World War. The Jews were given what were known as Aryan papers, that they were sworn to be baptized Catholics and taken into Polish homes. Of course, if they were caught, not only would the child be killed, but the Catholics who had hidden them would be killed as well. And of course, inquiries would be made into the people who had set these up, and these people would be hunted down and killed as well. That is to say, it was a very dangerous business. That's what this episode is about. We have an elderly university professor in ethics, Zofia, and we meet one of her neighbors who collects stamps. Now we'll learn of him more of him in episode 10. There are many people who appear in various episodes of this in small parts or larger parts, and there's a direct callback to episode 2, because the ethics professor is talking about his story, the story of episode 2, where there is a woman whose husband is deathly ill in the hospital, and she is pregnant, but she is not pregnant by him. She is pregnant by a different man. And she is determined to get the doctor in charge to say, is he going to live? Is he going to live? I must know. And the doctor says, I can't swear to this. And she makes him swear because she says that if my husband lives, I will kill the baby through an abortion. If he dies, then I will keep the baby. And so the doctor is implicated in this. The ethics professor says that the most important thing about the lesson from episode 2 is that the child survived. That is the most important thing. Now, there is a stranger in this professor's class who is an American professor, a woman who has translated the Polish professor's works into English. She speaks fluent Polish, and she is clearly of Polish origin. In fact, the elderly Polish professor had met her some years before. They had met in New York, and the American woman had driven her around New York City, and the old woman has fond memories. But when she shows up in her class, it's clear from the beginning that there seems to be a closer connection than that. So the ethics professor has given her student, an assignment, which is, can you figure out the mystery, or how do you think this should have, the dilemma in episode 2, how that should have been resolved? Can you speak to the characters, the various characters, and why they acted how they did? So this American woman with the Polish name, she has her own ethical dilemma. And the ethical dilemma is this, that you have a young child, who is being taken to an apartment building because she's Jewish. And a Catholic couple has volunteered to go through the Aryan Papers route and to swear that this is a baptized Catholic child and will be protected. Now, the guardian of this child gets to the apartment, and there's a mysterious man in it who has his hands in his pockets with his face turned to the wall. And it falls apart at the last minute, right at the time of curfew. That the guardian, the would-be godmother, says, no, I can't go through with this because I would be breaking the 8th commandment, that I would be bearing false witness against my neighbor. And so the child was abandoned at curfew. Now, we found out that this child found another copier and hides against the wall. So the old lady comes in, and the old lady becomes frantic. Where is she gone? And she actually goes up to the fateful apartment, which is full of a bunch of, rather nasty people. And so the truth eventually comes out. I was the woman who abandoned you. And the American woman is, she rather suspected it. We see the ambiguity in her because she wears a cross around her neck, but also a chai symbol. And we have, this is one of the remarkable things about Kieslowski, because you think you know the answers to all the questions, and of course you don't know the answers to all the questions, and you learn so many amazing things in Kieslowski's film. Here's the answer to the mystery. That the professor's husband was an officer in the Home Guard, that is to say, the resistance against the Nazis. And he had been given information that this Catholic on the line in the Home Army would have been arrested and tortured and killed as a result if they'd gone through with that. Now, it turns out that the information that they'd got was false. And in fact, that the real, sincere Catholic family, they almost died as a result of this bad information. Later on in that night, we see the Jewish woman. We see her praying in her room, which is a shock to the professor, who who regards this, I don't know, ostentatious religious expression as being, I don't know, as professors would say, formalist. But she's quite touched by this. The next morning, it's decided that, oh, why don't we meet the couple? We know where the couple is that we're going to take me in. And the old professor says, "That's I tried to talk to them, and they tossed me out of my ear, So you can talk to them if you want, but I'm not going in there." And so the American woman, she goes, "It's a tailor shop." And you have to understand, again, this is 1980s communism in Poland, and everything is exceedingly dowdy. And the old tailor, he's making up clothes, bespoke clothes, but it's from some German catalog that's like 10 or 15 years old. That's the closest thing that he has to contemporary fashion. And she hesitates. The American woman goes into the shop and she starts telling a story. He says, "I'm not going to talk about it." And she keeps bullying ahead in a typically American way. And he says, "I'm not going to talk about it. I'm not going to talk about it." And he reveals some things, that he was only 22 years old at the time. "Coat, I can make you this dress. Pick out a pattern, etc., etc." He wants to make some money on, bring him some, more modern designs. And she's not going to get any satisfaction from him, and so she leaves. And the old woman, the old professor, said, "I didn't go very far because I didn't think this was going to go very well." And you see them outside, and they're embracing each other, and it ends with the old tailor staring at them, and he recognizes the old woman. But there's some things which are, so powerful that you don't want to talk about them. Decalogue 9, "Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife." Now, episode 6, "Thou shalt not commit adultery," was not actually about adultery per se. This is, we have a surgeon. At the beginning, we find out that he has a severe medical condition, which means that he's become impotent, and he's always going to be impotent. And he is distraught at this because he has a very attractive, sexy wife, and he suspects that if he is not able to perform for her, he will be cuckolded. And this is a story of cuckoldry. And she says, "Oh, that doesn't matter to me. That doesn't matter to me. Love is, more than an itch in the groin." And he thinks, and he's right to be skeptical, because we find out that she is cheating on him. She's cheating on him with a physics student who's about half her age, and she's been cheating on him for quite some time. Despite his remonstrations that he doesn't really care about that sort of thing. Well, he's a man, of course he cares. And he taps his own phone. He has a key made for his mother-in-law's place where his wife has their trysts. He certainly wears the cuckold's horn, because he exposes himself to one humiliation after the other, all while his wife is affirming his great love for him. Eventually, he is caught literally hiding in a closet, staring into an apartment. And she tries to make amends, and he's seen that she has broken up with her young lover. But of course, there's a lot of misunderstandings in films. I mean, Kieslowski plays very much with this idea of us thinking we know everything when we don't. We only have partial statements of the truth, which leads us to draw conclusions which aren't warranted. After the humiliations the husband has gone through, he says we need a break from each other. And she says, "Oh, yes, you should take a vacation." He says, "No, you should take a vacation." So she decides to go to the Tatra Mountains, to Zakopane, to ski. And then he happens to see this young blonde fellow, his wife's lover. He's got skis on top of his car, and he puts two and two together, and he calls the student's mother, and oh no, Marius is not here. He's gone to Zakopane. And the husband decides that he's going to top himself as a result of this. In fact, Marius, the young student, has fallen in love with the wife, and he's decided that, oh, he's going to bump into her by chance in Zakopane, and they will rekindle their relationship. And it's too late. It's too late, you know. But going back to this question of whether Kieslowski was Christian, you see this throughout the Decalogue and throughout Kieslowski's other films, you know, The Three Colors or The Double Life of Veronique. This idea that, again, similar to what you see in Eric Rohmer, that there are no accidents in life. And the husband makes this terrible commitment. I mean, he follows through with it, no question. Another suicide or attempted suicide. But curiously, you know, after the reveal of the adultery, they had talked earlier about neither of them had ever wanted a child. And so after the adultery, she starts talking very animatedly, you know, we should have a child. Now, they can't have a natural child, but we should adopt a child. That having a child would, I don't know, make our marriage more real, which, of course, is a very retrograde notion. But that's how people used to think in the old days. Now, Decalogue 10, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's goods. You could look at it as a palate cleanser. It's really, it's a comedy, a black comedy, kind of a farce about greed. That you have, it begins at it's funny, you know, watching Decalogue. It's like Western fashions showed up in Poland like 10 years fashions, the way that particularly the young women are dressed, their clothing, their hairstyles, or whatever. It's very amusing and rather charming. Anyway, so there is a punk. Anyone who's seen A Three Colors White will recognize him as the protagonist. And amusingly, he sort of sums up the whole of the decade by shouting this song, which is pretty much about violating all of the commandments. Despite the fact that he's a Polish Johnny Rotten, as it were, he seems like a very nice person, actually, when we get to know him. But his brother, who he hasn't seen in years, literally years, with his suit and his tie, appears, you know, in the mosh pit, and this is not a close family at all. The brothers were not close. Neither of them were close to their father. Their mother had left their father a long time ago. They knew almost nothing about him. He'd become a recluse. We'd met him in episode 8. He was the fellow telling the professor, the ethics professor, about his great find, which was a set of German stamps from 1931 of the Polarfracht expedition to the North Pole. The old ethics professor, she doesn't know anything about stamps, but she appreciates that this old man is terribly excited and gratified by this. Well, we learned something about stamp collecting in episode 10, although I once say I used to collect stamps myself, and I don't know, pedant alert. There's a scene in this where a serious stamp dealer is shown picking up a stamp, and he holds it between his thumb and his forefinger here. It's never done. No serious stamp collector would ever hold a stamp between their hands because it gets oil on it and degrades the stamp. They have special tools for picking up stamps, but that's a minor cavil. So the old man is dead, and they know very little about him, but they find that he was fanatical about security, and there's about 5 different locks on his terribly shabby room. There's also an alarm system, and he collects stamps. You know, big deal. Collects stamps. Up his life to collecting stamps, he alienated everyone in his life for collecting stamps. For instance, that the Swedes call Sweden Sverige, or I don't know how that's pronounced, or that Siamese cat in Polish is Kot Siamski. I know that because I was given a large stamp. As I say, they learned that these stamps are potentially valuable. Well, how valuable? And they thinking like 4,000 zlotys. I don't know how much 4,000 zlotys is, but I'm thinking, what was that, like $100 or something? And then some man appears with a crutch, and he says that the old man owed me 220,000 zlotys. And they're not, the 2 sons are not very well taken with this because, like, where are we going to get that money? And then he starts looking over some of the stamps, and he knew of money. And then another serious, collector dealer shows up and says, yes, this stamp will buy you or this series of stamps will buy you, an apartment in Warsaw. And so they're sitting on a gold mine, as it were, and then you see the greed kick in. Because, yes, he was this foolish old man who collected a bunch of stamps, which is something an idiot does, but it turns out these stamps are worth a fortune, and not a small fortune either, a large fortune. And there's a lot of very amusing business about, as it were, the stamp underworld in Warsaw, where apparently everyone is looking to cheat everyone else. And also we get introduction of, how would you say, what's the gag called? The Spanish prisoner gag, only this time it involves a kidney. And the brothers turn against each other. And I don't know, it's a comedy, I suppose you could say it, although comedy is supposed to mean a happy ending, right? I suppose the happy ending of episode 12 is that the brothers, despite the fact that they have taken against each other over money, they end up being friends and closer than they had ever been before. This is the second Theater Thursday I've talked about Kieslowski's Decalogue. If you haven't seen this already, why haven't you seen it? It is one of the greatest works of art of the 20th century. And again, for decades, it was involved in horrible VHS or DVD versions. Now you got your choice of the Criterion or of the Arrow version. It looks great. Doesn't cost all that much money, really. There's 10 hours of it. That's like 5 feature films. And you will find yourself returning to this again and again and again. This gets an A+ from me. It is tremendously moving, endlessly moving, and thought-provoking. Anyway, I've run a little late today. I suppose that's appropriate because I say there's not going to be a show tomorrow. But God willing, there will be one on Monday if I manage to work out an internet situation in my new place. Mediahead says the grainy live stream in a hotel is deja vu, as in a David Lynch film. Well, I never looked at it that way. It's funny, I've never spent much time looking at myself in the mirror, You know, I never thought, oh, I'm so, so handsome, etc., etc. But the different lighting schemes that I've been exposed to, it's funny. You see how my hair looks blonde under this lighting? My hair is not blonde. My hair is gray. It's pretty much white. But I don't know. You got this kind of orange Batman thing going here, right? Although I don't know the kind of California, sun-kissed hair I got. I could live with that. MCT says men fall for what they see, women fall for what they hear. That's why women wear makeup and men tell lies. KMG, interesting show. Good luck with the move. Good night, all. Well, thank you, MCT. Um, yeah. Again, oh, yes. Why am I getting a feeling like deja vu about this review? Says Choco 666. Did Kevin do this one at one point? And my trailer disgrace said he did first half previously. Yeah, again, the first half is just under 5 hours, and the second half is just under 5 hours. I was thinking of breaking it into threes, the same thing. I could have done, each episode separately, but again, that would be 10 different episodes. So I decided to break it in half. That's the show for today and this week. As you know, I will not be live streaming tomorrow because I will be on the move to the Lower Mainland, where I grew up. And I hope to be back on the air on Monday, assuming that will happen. A perennial favorite. Death Wish, Michael Winner, 1974. Charles Bronson. Yeah. You remember black people running amok, etc.? Well, it didn't happen just yesterday. It happened in the 60s and 70s, and Michael Winner made a film called Death Wish, which was a huge success and was called a to mug and kill you is fascism, apparently. Yeah. And an exquisitely beautiful film by Ken Russell before he became, the Ken Russell that everyone knows, made for the BBC in 1962 called Elgar, Sir Edward Elgar, the great composer, August 27th. I use this word harrowing a lot. You may have heard it. Some sort of violent porn movie. It's a film about World War II in White Russia by L.M. Klimov. It's called Come and See. I suppose maybe I should work to alternate this more and more. September 10th is not anywhere near as gloomy as Come and See. That would be impossible. But it's a movie set in Bethnal Green, London, in 1947. It's called It Always Rains on Sunday by director. And also was one of the directors in the Ealing. And about this on my old podcast. I put this in his list of top 10 horror films ever made. It came out in 1945. And it has segments directed by Alberto Cavalcanti, Charles Crichton, Basil Dearden, and aforementioned Robert Hamer. And it includes a piece with much you have either seen or you have seen one of the innumerable parodies of. So that's the show for today. Thank you so much for tuning in. Again, I will be back on the air, God willing, Monday at 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern. If you like the show or any part of it, I would greatly appreciate it if you would click on the like button and subscribe to my YouTube channel if you have not done so already. If you would like to make a donation to this live stream, which would be greatly appreciated under the present circumstances, I don't know, of me being the live stream Flying Dutchman. All right. Again, I would greatly appreciate any donations. You can send them to PayPal at kevin_grace@hotmail.com. If you are Canadian, you will have access to Interac, and you can send me donations directly at kevingrace@shaw.ca. And I will leave you with this. In these times of social atomization and civilizational destruction, I do dearly wish that all my dear viewers and listeners manage to forge a genuine human connection in order to ease the burden. Good night.